Hi, everybody. It is 2 o'clock, so we're going to get started. My name is Grace. I'm with Project APIS-M. We're a nonprofit that funds resources, and forage for bees and beekeepers. While the detection of the yellow-legged hornet is not great news, we're happy to be able to share some information about it with you today. I just have a bit of housekeeping before we get started, and I turn it over to Brooke with AIA. Please use the chat function to ask questions, and we will address all questions at the end of the presentations. If your question is for a specific speaker, please indicate who the question is for. This webinar is also being recorded and will be shared at a later date on Pam's YouTube channel. And now I'd like to introduce our host, Brook Decker. Brook is Vice President of the Apiary Inspectors of America and the Pollinator Health Specialist and State Apiculturalist for Vermont. So Brook, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. So we are really happy to have this group pulled together pretty quickly. I want to thank all the guests here and the presenters and Project APIS-M for collaborating on this project. So we organized this webinar really to help us all learn more about the yellow-legged hornet biology. And we want to we're going to learn about its recent spread in Europe and get an update from the current situation in the Southeast US. And we hope that you all leave here empowered to understand our various roles, whether we're beekeepers, apiary inspectors, or just concerned citizens. If you're a naturalist, an entomologist, we all have a role to play in learning to identify and hopefully eradicate this species. So the ultimate goal here for today is to learn and work together towards the common goal of collectively monitoring for this and other invasive species in a scientific and organized manner. So not to add any fuel to a fire of that can happen when a news story like this breaks. So the agenda for today is going to be as follows. We're going to have some folks from COLOSS, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They're going to talk about the biology and its spread through Europe. And then we're going to get an update from the US, and then we're going to learn more about how we can trap for monitoring. And we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And we again thank you all for coming. So with that, we're going to start with Dr. Allessandro Cini from the Università di Pisa, and I believe that is in Italy. And he has a degree in ethology and animal ecology from the University of Florence, Italy. His current research focuses on the biology and behavior of Vespa velutina, social immunity and honeybee behavior, and chemical aspects, among other projects related to social insect parasites. And I will add too that we through the AIA organized a meeting with these folks through COLOSS, and these two presenters that are going to talk about this today are from COLOSS, which is the Prevention of Honeybee Colony Losses, which is an international nonprofit association headquartered in Bern, Switzerland, that's focused on improving the well-being of bees at a global level. And these two are from the Vespa task force. So they have a lot to share with us and know a lot more about this than we do. And so we'll start off with Allessandro, and then we'll move on to Sandra Roja Nossa, and I'll give her an introduction when it's time. So you can take it away, Allessandro.
Thanks, Brooke. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to share my presentation. First of all, thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the lovely introduction. It's a real pleasure to share with you some of our little knowledge, little experience with Vespa velutina in Europe, and for me, especially in Italy. Then Sandra will talk about Spain, and we'll try to give you an idea, an update of what's going on in Europe. So let me share my screen. and I'm going to ask if you can see the full screen.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm a behavioral ecologist. I've been working on velutina since 2014, more or less, with varied commitment across the years, because I'm mostly involved in pure research. So as Brook was saying, behavior, sociality, evolution of sociality, communication. But obviously what you get from pure research, you can try to apply to applied research. And velutina represents a wonderful case for that. We need to understand also the behavior, its lifestyle, the life history traits, to understand how we can fight these pests, these alien, these invasive species. Today, what you'll hear from me, obviously, is not just my work, it's the work of many, many people. So it's a lot of colleagues from all over Europe. So it's not just my stuff. And I thought about, me and Sandra, we thought about how to split the points we want to discuss together and what we can tell you of importance. So from the Italian side, I guess that I'm going to give you an update, but especially I'm going to try to give you a few suggestions from our country. So the situation in our country is somehow similar in a way to your one, meaning that we are a country that, contrary to France, for example, where velutina is everywhere, we have velutina just in a couple of regions and nothing so far in all the other regions. So we are really at the edge of expansion. And this is important because it can mirror somehow your situation. So I will try to give you first a few basic information about velutina. Who is velutina? Basically the life cycle, then how is the Italian situation and what have we learned over these years. It's not exhaustive, obviously. We have 20 minutes each and it's not exhaustive. I'm gonna focus on a couple of things that I really think matters to you. So, we're talking about social wasp, a hornet, a social vespid, and sorry, I can remove this part here. Okay, so, and we know that there have been a lot of introduction of vespids all around the world, but especially social vespids are very good at invasion. For example, you know, yellow jackets, native to Eurasia. These species have been introduced and are quite well diffused in North Africa, Argentina, Australia, especially New Zealand, where their economic impact has been estimated in about $130 million per year. On another side, paper wasps are probably less expensive as invasive species, but they're quite good in that. And then we come to hornets. And I'm sure that you all know about the introduction of Vespa mandarinia in North America, but obviously one of the most dreadful, I'd say, most important invasions all over the world is that of the yellow-legged hornet, Vespa velutina. Native to Southeast Asia, it arrived in Europe, Korea, and Japan, and is spreading, as you know, obviously, in many other parts of the world. One of the 22 species of hornets all around the world is not the only one that can arrive in other places. Hornets are really good in getting transport, it seems. And here I highlighted just some of the hornets that have been spotted somewhere, like as alien or invasive species. But as I was telling you before, Vespa velutina probably created one of the most powerful invasion, at least so far in 3 places, one of which is Europe, starting from this area of Southeast Asia, where there are many different species and color morphs of velutina. And so far, what we know is that in Europe, only nigrithorax arrived. So that is called Vespa velutina nigrithorax, because it has this color morph, which is quite distinguishable from the other ones. And in 2003, 2004, it arrived in Europe. Took a little bit before the news spread, apart from the scientific channels, you know. And obviously for you it's faster because you're already aware about the issues about Vespa velutina, no? For us Europeans, at the time was not so fast. And during the first years, when the news arrived on the main channels, some people were saying, well, maybe it's just another hornet for Europe. Europe already had 2 hornets at that time, Vespa crabro and Vespa orientalis, this last one more on the southern part of Europe. And so some people were saying, maybe it's just another, maybe it's not even invasion, maybe it's just another hornet will stay somewhere in France, where it arrived, where it was spotted, and where we know now that it was introduced. And the story demonstrated that it's not the case. In a very few years' time, Vespa velutina conquered about all France, conquered part of Spain, conquered part of Italy, and is spreading farther and farther. And Sandra will talk more in detail about the history of invasion. And hornets in general, social wasps in general, but also hornets, are very good in invading places for a series of features, one of which is that a single mated female can start a new colony. So it's sufficient to have just one female, which is mated. She can start a new nest. This new nest can produce a lot of workers. We can arrive up to hundreds to thousands of workers, especially in the case of velutina. And then at the end of the season, these colonies produce hundreds of sexual. So females and males, which then mate, and then the mated females can start, each one of them obviously can start a new colony. Then clearly you have the death during the overwintering period, etc. But in principle, you can just have one mated female, and that's sufficient to start a new invasion. Think about that, and you can realize that not only it's important for new introductions, but also for reintroduction in the same place where you have eradicated that species. Or also, it's sufficient to leave just one female that the invasion can take place again. Okay, so that's a really, really important point. Let's see the cycle of this wasp. This is a hornet, but it's a wasp anyway. We have overwintering female. These are the mated females I was talking about before. They have the sperms in their spermatheca, so fully equipped to find a new colony. They stay overwintering, they pass the winter in sheltered places, like can be log of woods, for example, or pots or rock crevices, wherever it's safe and sheltered from environment. Around spring, depending on the place, depending on the season, they go out from the overwintering phase and they found nests. So let's say March, April, they start founding the new colonies. They made their paper nest, they go out to forage, they lay eggs, and little by little, the colony grows. Emergence of workers after emergence of workers, dozens, hundreds, up to thousands. There is a so-called worker phase where the colony is big, is large, thousands of workers. And that is when we start to have problems at the apiaries. The colonies that grows need food, and the food is mostly taken at apiaries. And obviously, you can easily realize that a beehive is a sort of supermarket for these animals, okay? It's a lot of food concentrated in one place. After that, all this food is taken to larvae. The larvae grows, they produce at the end of the season, around September, the sexuals, so the future reproductives, males and females, and each nest can produce up to 900 males or 350 gynes. Well, 350 obviously is just to give an idea. No? So potentially, if nobody dies, you will have 305 new colonies the year after. Obviously, it's not like that. Clearly, there is death. There are many things, gynes which are not mated, etc. But in principle, you have a huge amount for a single colony of potential new colonies. Okay, and that is probably one of the reasons of the incredible fast explosion of the population, at least in Europe. After that, you have the mating. After that, you have the overwintering because the male dies, but the female stays there and go into the sheltered places I was telling you before. So that is the colony cycle. It's important to know the colony cycle, to understand all the different features of the colony cycle, to get an idea about why this species is so good at, sustaining introductions. For example, it's quite easy if you realize to take by hazard an overwintering queen in a group of woods or in some potteries or whatever, and transport this queen in many different places. It's important to know the cycle because we need to know when it's possible to find velutina workers in the apiaries if we want to do monitoring, or it's important to know when we have to put traps if we want to do the spring catching of queens. And especially it's important to realize that at some point the colony produces sexuals. And if we manage to destroy the nest before, it's good. If we arrive too late, the sexual will have already left the colony. And even if we destroy the nest, it's probably meaningless, okay? So it's really important to know the biology. All right. These are some pictures of the nest. I was telling you before that the nest at the beginning is it's quite small. It's made by the queen. It's quite small, like a tennis ball and then a soccer ball. Then little by little it grows. And at some point, workers relocate the colony. They relocate the colony. They relocate means not relocating the nest, but building a new nest in another place. Usually these primary nests are really low height, like 1, 2, 3 meters, while the secondary nests, these nests of the real season, like summer and then September, October, they are huge nests and they are made at the top, usually top of trees, so high altitudes, like 20 meters. And that is another very difficult point for the removal of nests. They are more visible, usually, at least where you don't have leaves, but they're very difficult to be reached. So the nest structure is a typical nest structure of a hornet. So you have several combs arranged one over the other, and you have an envelope all made of paper. What is impressive is the size that the colonies can reach. For example, you see here 40 to 60 centimeters, up to 1 meter of size. You can easily see these pictures, quite impressive. And up to 70,000 cells. The colony size in terms of individuals, as I was telling you before, it's about thousands, so 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 workers. They're also scary, as you can imagine, also from, I mean, not only from the ecological point of view, also from the personal point of view, it's not easy to work with these nests. All this mass of individuals growing the larvae, all these thousands of workers that will grow up and all the hundreds of reproductives, they need food. So while the others, in wasps and hornets, obviously, they feed on sugars, the larvae feed on meat, so they need protein. And this protein can be gathered in many, many different ways. But as I was telling you before, it's clear that a hive and a series of hives in an apiary with 30,000, 40,000 bees inside, which are continually going in and out, they represent a wonderful supermarket for them. And indeed, Vespa velutina, despite it has a very rather generous diet, as most hornets, it's particularly adapted to kill bees and to catch bees. What they do is to put in front of a hive, usually with the back toward the hive, opposite of this picture actually. They wait for bees to come back to from their foraging trips, and they catch them. And they're really skilled on that, They then catch the bees, they usually cut some parts, take the meaty part, and bring back that part to the nest, to their larvae, and back again. And you can have several hornets in front of the hive, dozens of hornets in front of the hive for the whole day. Obviously, these depend on the density on the colonies of velutina around your hives. It depends on the density of hives, etc. Many, many, many different factors. But it can be really, really a strong pressure on bees. And what bees does usually is that they're not very good in reacting, at least not so far. So they start basically freezing, making these little carpets in front of the hive, and they're not going to forage. Then Sandra will talk more about this point, because she's working in a country which is heavily impacted by velutina, so they have more data about that. But just to give you a very rough idea, there is a significant colony loss from the presence of velutina, which adds to the important costs about management, about the effort of beekeepers to deal with the problem, etc. But on top of that, there is also a colony loss of the apiaries, of the hives. And to give you an idea, a single hornet nest can consume up to 11 kilos of insect biomass in one season, okay? Now, we're talking about bees, but this is not the only issue. I'm not a beekeeper. I'm a biologist, not a beekeeper, so obviously I'm interested in bees, but also as I guess you all, also in other parts. And we need to take a wide picture about the issues that velutina represents. It's clearly a crucial problem for beekeepers. It is a crucial problem for beekeepers, but the important point is that not only for them, okay? First of all, let me show you a video about what happens in front of an apiary. This video has been taken by one of the first beekeepers working on velutina in Italy, Fabrizio, in the northwest of Italy. It was one of the first videos we saw about velutina in Italy. It's quite impressive. So the velutina is putting in front of the hive. She's waiting for the bees to come back. And as you can see, the bees are not really going in and out to forage. There is no flight, basically. You see one velutina here, one here, another, one, it's full of velutinas. So you're not hearing the voice because it's Italian, but basically this guy is saying, I have no idea what to do. I will probably move the hives. I will probably put a cage, a net. I have no idea what to do. It was really stressing in the first years to talk with beekeepers. It is still, obviously, not in their regions because they're used to that now. But every time a new beekeeper has velutina in front of the hives, it's quite impressive for each of us. I was saying that the impacts are not only related to beekeepers, obviously. Which are the other impacts? I was telling you that one single nest can gather about 12 kilos of praise. These are not only bees, okay? So we have this great ecological impact of native biodiversity. Be careful that this impact is not yet estimated, okay? So it's something we are quite sure about because they're not eating, we'll see the data, they're not eating only bees, but we still don't know what they're eating apart from bees. And we know that they're eating a lot of things. So you have to reason that not only they have an impact on ecosystem services provided by bees, but also by the other bees, the non-honeybees, okay, all the others, and all the other insects. Then you have the economic impact on beekeeping, obviously, which I was telling you before is beekeeping, the real beekeeping, but also the management. There are studies estimating the costs at the societal level about velutina in Europe, and there are enormous amount of money. You have to think about the monitoring, about the destruction of nests, about the dissemination. Everything matters, everything counts in terms of money. And so it's really a huge amount of money. And the third point, so the economic point about bees, the ecological point about the other bees and the other insects, and potentially also some plants, which might suffer from a decreased pollination because of the lack of some pollinators because of the presence of velutina, okay? The third point is about public health issues. It's not that velutina is necessarily more aggressive than other hornet species. At least there are no studies as far as I know. It's not that it's more venomous or more allergic, but probably one of the reasons why we are more concerned about that is related to the life history and to the ecology of the species. First of all, the colony is really big. So if you have a colony, like in this picture here, close to a house, now this was not really habitated, but anyway, if you have a colony close to a house, you basically have 6,000 or 5,000 workers ready to sting. Compare, for example, in Europe to hornet, which has usually hundreds, okay? So many more workers, many more things. Second point, the density. These these hornets, sorry, can reach enormous density, 12, 20 nests per square kilometer. Okay. Third point, compared to other hornets like Vespa crabro, to which us Europeans are well used to, they made the nest in open places. So not underground, but in open places, on trees, on buildings, and this obviously increases the risks. So please bear in mind that we're not only talking about an issue for beekeepers, but also an issue for society. And for that reason, in 2016, Europe officially recognized this species as one of the exotic species of relevance, for which we need to do monitoring, to do management. Okay, sorry. I was telling you that there are several impacts about velutina, and just to give you an idea, this is the diet of velutina in different places, like artificial surfaces, agricultural areas, and forest areas. And as you can see, it's not only about bees, but there are diptera, other hymenoptera, like wasps, etc. This was the first study, but made on morphological recognition of prey. But when you use molecular data, when you sequence the genes, the DNA within the gut, for example, of larvae, you discover that bees in some places are only a very small part of the diet. See, for example, in these places in UK, that most of the prey are wasps, hoverflies, spiders, blowflies. Okay, so the message is important to care about velutina for bees, honeybees, but also for the environment. So what happened in Italy? Italy, as I was telling you before, is at the edge of invasion. These are the most colonized countries, France and Spain, high densities of nests. Italy is here, more at the edge. We saw velutina for the first time in 2012, then in 2013, 2014, a little bit of more nests, then somehow an explosion in 2014, 15, 16. And in 2015, it was the situation. So the northwest of Italy was rather colonized, and we were depicting three possible ways of channels of spread, direction of spread for Italy, along the coast, along this road here, and these other roads. These are the main highways in Italy. And the situation right now is that basically not a lot of invasion occurred here in the north part, but we had a big invasion in Tuscany. So the species is currently going southward along the coast. And Tuscany, my region now, it's really where the problem is felt right now. That also for this reason, the region decided to put up a monitoring scheme, which will start in a few weeks. What happened in Italy? How people moved? There have been many local projects, obviously, many people involved, a lot of beekeepers. I just cite two projects of bigger size. One was a live project with a lot of fundings, about 2 million euros, which lasted for 4 years, and which managed to destroy 2,000 colonies. Okay, they did a good job. There are some colleagues from Turin. They did a good job, but as is always happened, when the fund stops, it's difficult to carry out the same job. So not everything stopped, but the most important activities of destruction decreased, obviously, their entity, their size, their importance. And then there's been another project, which is Stop Velutina. I'm part of it. It's somehow now it's an unfunded project, and it's based on the willingness of people to take part of the project for free. And this is a very important point. Don't believe that you can only rely on funds to fight against this species, because I don't think it's going to be the case. I hope for you that's going to be the case, but it's not been the case for most of the countries I've been involved with, I've been talked to, okay? So you have to rely on funds, you have to ask for funds, but also to rely on people not working for free, but people happy to participate because they recognize the issue. And what can you do? I will just touch on the monitoring side. How many minutes still have? Guess not a lot. 3, 4 minutes?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, probably, yeah, 3 or 4 minutes is good. Up to 5 is probably okay.
Okay, perfect. So in a country like Europe, where you just discovered velutina, the most important things to do, in my opinion, is to do a proper monitoring. Proper means the best you can do, okay, just to be clear. The monitoring is important to do the early warning, and in case where you find the nest, to destroy the nest, okay, that's the point. There are two main ways of doing the monitoring. A network of fixed monitoring sites through trapping, or a sort of unstructured monitoring network. The first one is basically, at least in Italy, has been basically done by beekeepers. So we organized a network of monitoring trapping site using traps based on a standard protocol which uses beer and these bottles where the hornet is attracted by beers and fall inside the trap. It's cheap, can be done easily. We can discuss the protocol later. It has some pro. That is done by stakeholders, so people that usually are happy to do this kind of monitoring. It is a fixed point, you can decide where, it can guarantee some continuity, and obviously velutina is likely to be seen at apiaries. The disadvantages is that beekeepers also have to do a lot of other things, so not always are happy to do for a long time. So usually they start, but then they leave the monitoring scheme for legitimate reasons. And the second point is that with apiaries, you're not covering the whole territory. There won't be a lot of apiaries, for example, in the middle of a town. There won't be a lot of apiaries in natural parks, maybe. So you have areas where velutina can be that you're not covering with beekeepers. So another kind of monitoring, which is complementary, the other one, is based on citizen science. And for that, we developed this website about the project Stop Velutina, where we do some dissemination, and where we organize a way to report the presence of velutina. It works as the more important platforms like iNaturalist, etc. is obviously a very small version, but it's a website dedicated to velutina. So you can somehow have a sort of fidelization of the citizens. And we get a lot of reports. We get about 7,000 reports in 6 years. Not all of them about velutina. Clearly, there's a huge amount of wrong reports. But what is important is that it works. We managed to have reports from all Italy. So even people from here, they report to have seen velutina. It was not velutina, fine, but they had their eyes open on the issue. And this is a very good, important point. The sooner you start, the sooner you have people watching for velutina. It was covering all the life cycle, so you want them to be looking at velutina for all the season, not only in August, but also before, and our data show that. And also, you want them to be attached to the project for many years. Our fear was, okay, we started in 2016, the first year, everybody's happy to signal, the second year, okay, the third year, nobody cares about velutina. That is a risk. We managed to keep people interested year from year. So, to go quickly to the conclusion, what I suggest for you, from my little experience, but really from the heart, is to start monitoring as soon as you can, and do not stop. Continue to do the monitoring, even when you know that velutina is there. A partial and imperfect monitoring is better than no monitoring. You have to destroy the nest as much as you can and as soon as you can, because otherwise you will have the reproductives going away. Don't think that you are far from the problem. Even if you live very far from the point of presence of velutina, this animal easily jumps thanks to the movement of queens, mated females, as I told you in the beginning, okay? And there are many cases all over Europe of that. So don't think that, well, I'm far from the front of invasion. Don't think it's not your problem, even if you're not a beekeeper, because the environment concerns us all. And also because you can get stung, it's not really nice. And also, we didn't have time, and probably Sandra will talk about that, but other countries have a lot of experience, especially failed experience, for example, in management ways, monitoring ways. So keep talking with other people, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's not a lot of time to stop the invasion, so don't waste time in reinventing the wheel, especially when it was not working. And everybody, I'm sorry if I've been a little bit late. I'm happy to take your questions, or probably leave the stage to Sandra right now. Thanks.
Well, Dr. Cini, that was amazing. And yes, all I can say is thank you. And there was a lot of info in there and great advice. That was really great. And to not waste any time, we can move on to Dr. Sandra Roja Nossa, and she is currently the research associate, or a research associate at the University of Vigo in Spain, and her current research focuses on the impacts of Vespa velutina in pollination landscapes, the pressures of V. velutina on honeybee populations, and methods for detecting populations. So we warmly welcome Dr. Roja Nossa.
Thank you, Brooke. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So let's see, how do I share my screen? Now you see it?
It's coming. Yep, we see it, not in presenter mode yet.
Brooke, if my sound is bad, I can turn off the video, so because I can have issues with the internet sometimes.
It sounds good so far.
Okay, so and the image is good too?
That's good now, yep.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Sandra Rojas, biologist and beekeeper. And the difference with Allessandro is that I first was a beekeeper, and then velutina arrived to my region, arrived to my apiary. But I was at the beginning of my experience with bees, with beekeeping. So I had to learn how to do beekeeping while Vespa velutina is present and expanding. I work in the University of Vigo, and now I am also a chair of the Velutina Task Force in COLOSS. So let's begin with the story of all the invasion in Europe. It arrived in 2004 to France. There was introduced and then expanded across the country, across France. In 2010, arrived to Spain. In 2011, Portugal and Belgium. And in 10 years, arrived also to Italy. This is the progress provided by a map made by the Museum of Paris. And these are the first 10 years. This was a huge extension in terms of the number of nests that began with only one queen. Then in 2015 arrived to Germany, then to the UK, then to Holland and Switzerland, then to Luxembourg, Ireland, and lately to Hungary. This is quite an important and impressive extension. Now, almost all southwestern Europe is invaded, or at least has its presence was recorded. Now let's see what happened in terms of numbers. What happened in the region where I live and work. This is the northwest of Spain. The region is called Galicia, with almost 30,000 square kilometers. Here, the species was recorded in 2012 at two sites, on the south and on the north at the coast. Then expanded across the years, and in almost 4 years, it expanded across the whole coast. Nowadays, the whole territory is full with nests of velutina. Everything began with these two nests, and this is the exponential growth that we experienced here. Second year, we had 17 nests, and then more than 900, 5,000, and so on, exponential. And then in the last years, tended to stabilize, to be more stable. Now we have between 40 and 70 nests per square kilometer in average. Well, how do we arrive to this? First, we have to see the common growth of an invasive species when it arrives. There are it is a small number of localized populations that it grows. And finally, there is a situation of stabilization. Across this process, we can do different things. At the beginning, when it's not present, we can prevent to arrive. When it arrives and there is a small population, we can eradicate it. We have a window of action. Then we can contain it, and then we are faced to long-term management. Of course, the costs of control increase with the population. This is what happened here. So we had the first nest, and we had a little window of opportunity to eradicate it. I think that our window of opportunity was here in Galicia was 2 years. The first when it was first recorded, and the next. Now we are here and we are long-term, and we have to do only long-term control. Unless a very successful method arrives, that is not easy to do. Well, let's see what happens with honeybees. Alessandro already explained a lot of the behavior, which is a very interesting behavior as a hunter. So these wasps are ferocious hunters of honeybees. They are attracted to honeybee fragrances. They hunt the bees on the flag mainly, and they take some parts, especially the thorax, to the nest to feed the brood. They do this all day long for months. Honeybees, Western honeybees, Apis mellifera, tend to defend themselves. But these defenses are not so good as the defenses created by other species that have evolved with this kind of hunters, such as Vespa serrana, the honeybee of Asia, or Apis florea. So they tend to defend, they make these kind of heat balls, creating huge temperatures and low and high concentrations of CO2, engulf the hornet who steps on this carpet of bees, and often they get to kill the hornet. But the problem is that there are so many hornets hunting in front of the hive that these bees cannot with this predator. So successful and so many. So they finally tend to paralyze. So this is the region where I work. In 2020, I made an experiment having some hives not protected by any method and other protected with electric harps. And I measured different things happening to the colony and what is going on with the hornet hunting. These are the electric harps. It is a frame with some wires with positive and negative electricity, and they receive electric charge. So they get frozen for a while and then fall into a cage. So they are captured there. These devices do not interfere with bee behavior and in principle. Our objectives were then assessing the effectiveness of the devices and comparing the performance of the colonies. Here we have our results. What we found is that there are different levels of predation in different sites. This can happen, this can be different also across the years. Not all sites have the same numbers of hornets according to the environment and the number of nests from former years. Okay, so we had 3 different natural levels of predation, and what we found is that the electric harps helped bees to behave more normally. So they reduced the predation on honeybees. What happened in the red bars are unprotected hives, and the green ones, the protected. We found that the number of foraging workers in the hives under attack were in some seasons very, very low. That means that they were not leaving the hive. They were totally paralyzed. They stopped foraging, stopped going to for water, resins. They didn't even clean the hive. So this paralysis reduces also the quantity of workers because they don't bring more food. They are lighter workers. The workers that are born late are lighter, and less workers because the pollen income is also particularly affected. So the quantity of fruit, quantity and quality of workers were seriously affected. Then impoverished colonies, meager workers, and scarce resources, and in lower survivorship of colonies, especially in the winter and the next spring. Maybe the colonies survive, most of them survive, but some other are start during the autumn, but mostly in the spring. Okay, so predation affects the number of workers, creates this phenomenon known as the paralysis of the colony, which reduces the resources, the weight of and quantity of workers, inducing higher mortality of colonies, reducing the pollination services provided by honeybees, and with that, affecting beekeeping. This beekeeping effect is principally by the mortality of colonies. We here have among 30 to 50% higher mortality of colonies due to Vespa velutina. So beekeepers have to rebuild their apiaries almost the half every year. So, and predation also increases stress on bees, and I think also on beekeepers, because we can't stand there and see how these animals eat our bees. And then we are faced to do control activities, to do things, and this implies time and money. So it helps to affect profits for beekeepers. But as Allessandro said, not only impacts pollination, no impacts honeybees, sorry, also impacts pollination in general, because these hornets not only predate on apiaries, they also go for places where a high quantity of insects congregate, such as flowers. With that, they change the behavior of pollinators and the quantity of pollinators, especially other vespids, Apis mellifera, bombus, bumblebees, and solitary bees and flies. With this, the plants, some native plants, receive less pollen and of less quality, affecting the pollination of native plants. What can we do to protect our hives? These people from France suggested a lot of, made a review about different options. And they made also a review about the possibility. That was some years ago. And so far we have only tested two methods. This is the muzzle, which also tends to reduce the paralysis, helping for the survivorship of the colonies. However, this device alone does not kill the hornets, so the hornets go for hunting on another side, but the ARPs help with that part too. Another useful strategy for beekeepers is to move the hives to apiaries in a higher place, in a more altitude place, where there are not so many nests of Vespa velutina, but not all beekeepers can do that. And definitely, these two are not a total solution for the beekeeper. So we have also to detect and destroy the nests around our apiaries. This, as I said, involves two parts. First, you have to see it, you have to detect it. Where is it? And often it is very high and into the canopy of the trees. So it is very hard to see it before the leaves fall in autumn. So we have to see it by chance, or we have to perform active search. This active, for this last, we have different options. In the Balearic Island, they used places where they put some protein feeders, and they made triangulation. They had here an apiary, they put the protein here, and they looked at the direction of flight, the vanishing direction. So the intersection in this region must be the nest. And then they went there to look with their eye where the nest is. But this is easy when you have, like in the Balearic Islands, maybe 4 or 5 nests in the whole island. But here in a place such as Galicia with so many nests, it is not viable. So I developed a method to calculate these areas on a way using triangulation, but also knowing the speed flight of the hornets. It is already published. You can look at the literature. Another way is using technology. An Italian team developed a new method, which is not currently for sale. But this is radiotelemetry that has been used for wild tracking wild animals for long. And we used with a team of Exeter University to find nests. This is Peter Kennedy, who was teaching us here, me and my team, learning how to use this device to search and find the nest. Here was the nest. It is very difficult to see it, but here is. We were very happy that day. Okay, how to destroy it? Somebody asked in the chat, what is the way to destroy a nest? It depends. It depends on the size, the height, and the place where it is. For instance, the smaller nests, or queen nests, are usually built on human buildings, are accessible, and are pretty small. So it is easy to give it as prey, and it is not so dangerous. But when the secondary nests, or when the workers begin to emerge, it is very dangerous for a person. So they have to be trained. I suggest with technicians that know what they are doing. And yes, ideally to destroy them during the night, because these animals are diurnal. They tend to stay all the colony into the nest at night. Also the queen. So it is better to do it at night. This is a pole that injects a chemical substance to kill them, an insecticide to kill them. This is by drone. They have also used fire, but we have trouble with fire, so of course it is very dangerous in some places and in some seasons. These are using a gun with a small ball of insecticide frozen. There are different methods to kill a colony, and also it's important not to diminish risks for population and environmental risks too. So I think I'm going to finish this part of my talk here, looking at the globe and this climatic suitability of the regions. We are here, and this is the story of the place of Europe and the place where I live. But now you are facing a quite important threat for bees and for biodiversity and for health too. So I think this worth to take into account that this window of action is pretty small. It already began for you to count this year. And please, management plans and actions. Don't wait until the lion is upon us. So my suggestions are integrated pest management approach. Of course, prevention is the first of all this, but monitoring, quite important. Having plans for different situations, also important. Have prepared technicians, not to learn and then go, no. Have prepared people, and in case, use it, but otherwise it takes too much time. Continuous education of beekeepers and general public, and centralized tool for citizens reports. So I expect to have many questions during the session of questions. Thank you very much. And anything, you have my mail and you can ask on that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Roja Nossa. That was super, again, very informative. All the research you've done is amazing. And I think, heard the message loud and clear, sounding the alarm of advising us to have a good plan. And I think that segues nicely into we want to hear from some folks in the southern states. So if we can start with David Williams, I think for the sake of time, we're at the hour mark, and we have a 2-hour presentation or a 2-hour webinar here. So if folks want to give like a 5 to 10 minute update we'll start with Georgia and then move on to South Carolina, and then we'll talk about some trapping, and then we'll have plenty of times for Q&A to kind of get into stuff. So if that works, if David is available, I'm not sure David's going to be able to share a screen, but hopefully able to just speak. But yeah, and there's all the emails of all the speakers for today.
Hey, Ms. Brooke, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and apologize. I'm out in the field. We're on the Georgia Peanut Tour right now. I'm on a laptop and it's having to use my cell phone for hookup, and that's not very good in the area I'm at. All that good information that I've just saw, I don't know what else I could add to it other than tell you what we did in Georgia. 10 minutes. I don't know. I'll do my best. Uh, if you think I'm saying something you don't want me to say, you can just mute me, I guess. Here goes. Like everybody else, we get every time they do an article on murder hornet, we get a lot of people calling us, and hey, we've got it, and it's European hornet, and it's cicada killer, and it's everything else under the sun. But that's what I mean. We've been doing that for years, and this particular beekeeper, he sent us in a picture, same way, just sent us in a little picture and said, "Hey, I got something." We saw it and we said, "Probably need to get a sample of that one." So we sent an inspector by, and she met with the beekeeper and picked up the sample, and she called me and said, "Boss, yeah, this doesn't look real good." So we sent it to an identifier, University of Georgia, and they said, "Oh yeah," which of course, as everybody knows, it works with government. The wheels of government, they don't go really fast, so this takes a little bit of time. Because it was the first find in North America, it had to go to the USDA to be officially scored and recorded. And once that came back, then we responded by showing up at the beekeeper's house. A team of us went down and met with them. And look, because I mean, you find one in the United States, and you're like, man, what could it be? A hitchhiker? You really don't know. So I kind of challenged him. I said, he knocked it out of the sky with a stick, and I said, "Do you think you can knock down another one?" He said, "Well, I don't know. If I see another one, I'll try." Well, he did, and so that let us know that there was more than one. Okay, so then we took a team to. All of this is down in the Savannah area, Chatham County, which is on the coast. If you want to look on a map, everybody wants me to give them the GPS coordinates, and GPS coordinates are written down. We have all of that. We're being kind of guarded with that because our beekeepers and our homeowners are working with us really good. And if I start letting people know, hey, so-and-so's got a nest in their backyard, and the news shows up, well, then people are going to stop talking to us. So we are being guarded with some of this information. Now, I'll tell everybody out there, if you want to pull up a map of Chatham County, Georgia, everything that we have found, every positive, every one we've trapped, everything has been on that map in between Wilmington Island and Thunderbolt. If you make your little circle, that's probably about 5 miles radius of the circle, and that's where we've detected this hornet. We have caught it in traps. We have observed it at hawking on honeybees. I have a team right now combing through some woods as we speak, looking for a nest. Now, hey, we've only done this for a month, so we're no experts at it at all, and we freely admit that. Now, also, when we set out our traps, we put out a wide net. We did that for a reason. You set a wide net hoping that you're not going to catch it, right? And then as you work your trap line, you kind of zero in on the bullseye, and that worked very well. We do not have it all over Chatham County. We do not have it in Bryan County below yet that we know of. Like I said, we've narrowed it down to this 4-mile radius area that we know it's there. How do we find our first nest? I've been working for the state of Georgia for 30 years. I started inspecting bees in '95, and so I've got a little bit of time in the saddle working with beekeepers. So I knew some of them, and right off the bat, I reached out and I said, "Hey, we're going to need your help." And the response from our beekeepers has been awesome. They none of them, I can't say none of them, but most of them have helped us out a lot. That they're paying attention when they see them hawking. They're letting us know. And that I can tell you that when they say it's a bee hawk, that's exactly what it looks like. Just like a hawk catching a bird. That's a perfect example of it. One of the neighbors contacted one of the beekeepers and said, "Hey, I got a nest." Well, we had already done a little bit of scouting, and we had already got a direction that we knew that they were traveling back in. And I had actually went the day before. I had got within 100 yards of this beehive, of this nest. Well, this next morning we get a tip. A guy says he thinks he has it, so we pull up the address on GPS, and sure enough, there it is. That it's the young guys. They're really good with their phones, and they pulled it up and said, "Boss man, it's dead in line." I said, "We got to go. We got to go see it today." We knew it when I saw it. It was compared to a bald-faced hornet. It was twice as big as any I've ever seen, as far as the nest size goes. It was, and when they said, the presenter said that they're up high, no kidding. This one was 85 foot in the air. They like to be around water, evidently, because this one was in between a creek and a pond. we couldn't drive any equipment up to it. We flew 2 drones. This is the first day we found it. We flew 2 drones trying to get close to it. I didn't know that drones have this self-protecting mode where they can't go up in the canopy of a tree. So because there was a limb over it, we couldn't get a drone close enough to it. We actually flew a helicopter over it the first night. Chatham County flew a helicopter because they wanted to see if they could pick it up on thermal cameras at night, and they wanted to see, what the flight path was. If they could get to it, they couldn't. So it did take us a couple of days to find somebody crazy enough to climb that tree, and that's exactly how we took it out. Is we got an exterminator, and they got with a tree surgeon, and this tree surgeon, he climbed that tree, and he sprayed it, and it was all done at night. We didn't get through till about 1:30 in the morning. He sprayed it down. He asked me how he should do it. I told him, I mean, everybody wanted that thing. It was the first one ever found. They wanted it, right? I told him I didn't care. I wanted them dead. That's what I was paid to do, is eradicate them. So that's what I was doing. I said, you spray it down good, and then you disassemble it with the pressure of that nozzle. You just keep spraying until you break it in half. It worked great. It did. It broke them in half. He did cut the limb down, so we got every piece of it. That night, me and my team stayed there all night, picking it up, putting it in garbage bags, picking up all the hornets we could pick up. Universities have contacted us. So all of the comb, all of the nest, went to different guys and girls across the country wanted to study on it. So that's where it went.
David,
I do have.
I'm just going to chime in here real quick because we have probably about 2 more minutes. But do you know, so one, could you report if you're like just about the continued monitoring you're going to do, and if you've identified down to a species yet, or if that might be something someone is working on?
All right. Like I said, I'm all of that species, all of that stuff, the DNA and all of that's way over my head. They've sent it all over the place, and actually they're now collecting. Every time we find it in a new spot, and when I say find it in a new spot, we're picking it up in a trap or going to somebody's bee yard and finding it and catching it and collecting a sample. Every sample is being sent off now for DNA, which takes a while before we get any of that back. And the the reason they do that is they think they can tell us that it all come from one hive or nest, or is it coming from multiple nests? And so that's information we want to know. But it's not slowing us down in our hunt. We're going after it like we know, like we think there's 20 more nests over there, even if we only have one and we got it. And that's one thing I want to tell everybody. It got here this time. It's going to come back. If we was to kill every one of them tomorrow, there's now a pathway for it. What that pathway is, we still don't know. But if they can make it to Georgia, they can certainly make it everywhere else that's got a port. So I think everybody, which we have monitored for hornets in the past, but I think everybody needs to monitor more. Our traps are deadfall traps. The ones that we're putting out, we're baiting it. The best bait that we found in our part of the world is grape juice and sugar, molasses, brown sugar. That's been the best for us. Now we've caught them in other stuff, but by far we caught most of them in grape juice. Number one thing you got to have to catch them is hornets, and like I said, the places we've got about 200 traps put out right now, and we're only catching them in 5 or 6 traps. So I don't know what that
continuing to catch like lingering, you know, foragers like throughout, you know, but you feel, I mean, I guess this is all coming, but it sounds like you're still trapping, which is great.
Yeah, we're not going to quit trapping. I mean, that's the thing. Actually, we have a lot more traps ordered. Our latest round of traps that we ordered, and man, listen, we were just using traps that we dug up out of the, you know, old caps and farm bill traps. Everybody that works plants knows what that means. They're just bucket traps, but they work great. They were just sitting around. But I told her boss, I said, we got to go. We got to go. We can't wait. And so we didn't wait. As soon as we knew, we went and put out these traps, and they worked. But we're learning that there's better traps, and we're ordering better traps. But also, you know, we have the radio telemetry equipment that's ordered. It takes a long time before all that comes in. The USDA has been with us. I don't want you to think that they haven't. They have helped us. The Washington State people, they've been great. We didn't make up a lot of this stuff. We stole it straight off Washington State. Coming up with the Yellow-legged Hornet website where they could send in the complaints or the pictures and the inquiries. That was awesome because we got like 2,500 hits that first weekend, and none of my people, we have other things we have to deal with day to day. Nobody could have answered 2,500 emails in a weekend, and I know we're over 3,000. We're still getting a lot, but you know, the vast majority of them are cicada killers and European hornets. That's I know I'm going over a lot really fast, but I'm just trying to get it all in.
Yeah, well, I think this is great. And for the sake of time, we have so many speakers. I think this is really great. If you're able to hold on, hang on and see if there's questions that come up. I think this is great. And I think you really touched on a lot of things like that we, you know, I think a lot of people are concerned about, but also the goal of today is to, you know, we all are going to have to work together on this. And it's great to learn you're collaborating with Washington, and, you know, we'll probably have to reach out to Georgia, some of us at some point, to learn how, you know, what you guys did, you know, hopefully not, but, you know, it's just how we all need to work together. So again, thank you so much. And if you have any, like, want to say anything final, you're welcome to, but if not, we can move on to Brad here.
I'll yield my time to Brad.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you. And now we will have Brad Cavin, who is the Apiary Inspector in South Carolina. And I did not actually do a great job of introducing David Williams. He's the Chief Apiary Inspector in Georgia through the Georgia Department of Agriculture. and Brad is with Clemson University.
Cool. Thank you, Brooke. So I won't take up too much time, but I thought I'd just touch quickly on like the reporting tool. Like David said, they modeled their reporting tool after Washington State. And so we kind of followed that same lead where, we're asking people through the reporting tool to provide a location of where they're at. Can they describe the abdomen of the insect that they've seen? Have they seen a nest? And then to provide a photo. Photos, specimens, videos are critical in identifying these hornets, because like David said, we've been getting a lot of reports too. I have not found this hornet in South Carolina. I do have multiple sites set up along our border with Georgia that we're monitoring and checking, and I haven't found any hornets in any of my traps. And none of the reports that we have received have been for the yellow-legged hornet. David's right. The beekeepers have been helpful, but I would like to also mention that for my experience here in South Carolina, all of the reports that we have received have been from the public and not from beekeepers. And so it's important to try to get the word out. And, we're getting all these reports of all these lookalikes that have been, in South Carolina, the Southeast, the U.S. for 100 or 200 years. But, the other side of this is speaking more to the AIA members. My experience was I found out about this when Georgia did their press release and quickly had to circle the wagons and develop like a press release to get some information and the word out to the public. And so, a little bit of forward thinking and planning will help that process go a long way. If you ever, encounter something. My approach has been with this hornet, it's like three miles from South Carolina, and the hornet that Washington State dealt with, that's 3,000 miles. And so it's a little bit of a different situation when it's knocking on your doorstep. The other side is if you're going to do the public responses, be prepared for a lot of crazy reports, but you also need to prepare like responses. And so I went through and created a whole bunch of text and email replies that we send out when we do get reports. But in the essence of speeding up and saving time, Brooke, I'll say we're looking for it in South Carolina. We haven't found it. And, we're going to continue to look for it, and we'll be trapping next year also. So hopefully we don't find it. But if we do, our approach is going to be the same as Georgia. We're going to attempt to eradicate it the best that we can. And so I'll keep the
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, and there may be questions that come up, and thank you. That's great. So if you're in South Carolina and you want to report, Brad can maybe drop the link in the chat, or you can reach out to Brad, and he can help you with that. And I think part of this, the reason to have this workshop was to help folks determine the difference between, some of these other hornets. We all get calls after a news blast goes out, and then we're getting either pictures of just insects that have been smashed or just legs of insects.
I think the big thing is like what David said, a beekeeper found this hornet, made a report, and that's the big step, is if you see something, say something. But also recognizing that there are pests that are non-native insects and just non-native pests in general, and being aware and recognizing like, oh wow, I might need to report this. And so I think the beekeeper in Georgia deserves a lot of credit for recognizing something, and I also think that Georgia has done a really good job responding to this event. And it's not fun when it's in your state. It's not fun when it's at your doorstep, I can guarantee you. but
Definitely
I'll
not.
stick around and try to help out with any questions that we need to.
Excellent, thanks. And for those of you, the beekeepers that might be in the audience or any in the general public, so Brad mentioned AIA, and so that's a acronym that we use a lot, but that's Apiary Inspectors of America. There's a lot of apiary inspectors on here, but the Apiary Inspectors of America, we're a nonprofit organization with a mission to promote sustainable and healthy honey beekeeping conditions in North America. So if you need to find your apiary inspector, you could go to apiaryinspectorsofamerica.org and look up your apiary inspector, and they are really knowledgeable, helpful, resources through all of this. So with that said, we have another apiary inspector member with us. Karen Roccasecca from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is going to talk about the native wasp survey that she's been running and many states are participating in, and talk about different traps used. So we will, and the apiaryinspectors.org is in the chat now. So we'll pass it over to Karen, and great. We'll just if you 5 or 10 minutes with you, Karen, too, because I think we have lots of questions to cover.
Okay, that sounds good. Are you able to see it?
We're seeing your desktop.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of. Oh, there we go.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. All righty. These surveys that Pennsylvania has been running have been part of the USDA Farm Bill Grant Program, now the PPA 7721 program, and other states are very welcome and encouraged to participate. Through the grant, almost all the supplies and shipping costs are provided to participants. It started back in 2015 with an emphasis on surveying for northern giant hornets, formerly known as Asian giant hornets or murder hornets, and other invasive hornets and pests of the honeybee. In 2018, we added a native bee survey to the project, and this year we've gone back to just pretty much the invasive wasps. So what people do is they get their supplies, they set up their traps, they add their bait, and then they go every 2 weeks or so and collect samples, rebait the traps, and repeat this. It can start in the spring and go through the fall till hard frost, and in some areas they could sample all year if the weather is mild enough. The samples are sent in to us at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, and our awesome taxonomists identify them. The results are entered into a database, and then they get statistically analyzed. So you may wonder why it would be important to do surveys for native bees. Here we are talking about these invasive insects, but if we don't survey for native bees, we don't know actually what is in the area and the impact that invasives can have on them. If we don't know what we have, it'll be hard to determine. So native wasps, there are some here, of course, and it's just a quick little picture here of some. So you may wonder why it's important to survey and for these invasive insects. I think a lot of the other speakers have answered that question really well. Economically, they have a huge impact on things. We're dealing with spotted lanternfly, which is an invasive that came, and doesn't necessarily affect honeybees tremendously, but it's still had a huge economic impact. Goals of our survey, again, it's kind of preaching what other people have said. We want to be proactive and find these invasive bees and wasps or pests as soon as possible before they can become established. And you've heard how short the window of time is. We want to test some different traps and baits or lures to determine which are the most effective. easy to use and inexpensive. We want it to be something that is easy enough for anybody to do, and it's not a huge expense or a lot of effort. We want the surveys to become kind of routine and kind of like a fire drill where, oh yeah, we've been through this, we know what to do. Raising awareness, again, they've talked about that, and having the action plan ready is obviously very crucial. So invasive pests can come in on cut flowers, fruit, garden items, all kinds of things. Wood is another key source for a lot of invasives. There's a nice picture of some different ways they can get here. Trains have been key for spreading a lot of things in across the country. And some more shots. Another thing to consider is sometimes people will try and smuggle things in. There are people that consider some of these body parts of the hornets to be gourmet food items. We have used different traps and things for different surveys for different insects, as many of you are aware of. This is the blue vein trap. It's commonly used for bees, and we used that in the past. The jug trap, it can't get too much less expensive or easy to find than this trap. This is a recycled bottle that we get from work. We cut about a 3.5-inch hole in it, and the sugar water gets poured right into it. This year we're using this trap too, multi-lure trap. Some of you are probably familiar with this. This one, you can see the entrance is from the bottom of the trap. They go up and then they'll be attracted to the brown sugar water, and some of them have yeast. They'll be attracted to that. They'll get in there and then they can't get out. They'll drown. Bucket trap. That one, they come in through the top. Different lures have been used with this trap, but ours would be down in the bottom in the white part, the sugar water. This is a picture of a detection trap for northern giant hornets in Washington state. You can see that they're using some of the lower cost items too. Oops. The soda bottle. This is part of a research project out in Washington state. So there's a variety of traps. This one was kind of interesting. It is a trap that is attached to the front of the hive, and it doesn't necessarily keep the hornets out, but they're less likely to go in to that little enclosed area. And that seems to be working as part of a control program for a beekeeper in France. So we use different baits for different insects that we're hoping to catch. The sweet kind of rotting, fermenting smell of decaying fruit, it makes, it produces fermentation and acetic acid, and that's what gives vinegar its smell, to give you an idea. So there's a lot of different natural sources of that. To make it easier to conduct this survey, we are using 2 cups of dark brown sugar to 1 gallon of water, and then 3 drops of Dawn dish soap, the blue one, are placed in each trap, and that kind of breaks the surface tension. Some traps have baker's yeast added and some do not. Other people have had good success using orange juice and rice wine, and the rice wine apparently discourages bees from going in the trap. Apple cider vinegar, there's a lactic acid dairy drink that's used in Japan for trapping. And different attractants become popular at different times of the year with these insects. In India, they use decaying fish and decaying meat, and some will mash raw fish. So we don't do any of those because it's a little harder to ship those out to people to use. And we wanted to make it as easy and affordable as we could. So our results are being statistically analyzed and compared now. And it's a massive job because there are so many, there's different variables and different ecosystems. We have found that the best time to monitor varied a good bit by ecoregion, and it varied for bees and wasps. It's good to monitor beginning as early as you can through as late in the season as you can, just because you never know what you're going to catch. And I just want to say thanks to all the states that have participated and are participating in these surveys, and to AIA for all their support on this. So that was the very quick version.
Wow, thank you, Karen. That was speedy. That was
very speedy.
Great info. If folks have more questions about traps, Karen, you can email her or direct message her now, and then you guys can be in touch. Next up for our final speakers to talk about another trap is Amber Leach, who is the North American sales manager at Veto Pharma, which is a pharmaceutical laboratory dedicated to honeybee health that develops, produces, and markets a range of drugs and products designed to combat the key diseases and problems that threaten colonies.
Thank you so much for having us. And I have joining me one of our resident veterinarians. His name is Miguel. Miguel is located in Spain, and he has a ton of experience with the Asian hornet in Europe that I don't yet have. I'm not, of all the things I'm jealous of in life, that's certainly the least of them. I'm glad that I don't have a ton of experience, but I'm so glad that you guys invited me onto the call. I recognize some faces and some names, so I've had the opportunity to meet a few of you. But as the story unfolded, I was getting probably no less than 30 to 40 inquiries already from beekeepers across the country, and then a few state inspectors, of course. I've been in touch with the folks down in Georgia. But to that end, I wanted to say that I'm not an expert on this topic either. The folks in Europe have a little more experience than I do. But as the representative for North America with Veto Pharma, I wanted to let you guys know that you have my commitment to working with you to come up with solutions that will be suitable for everybody. You know, to Brad's point, I hope that eradication is possible. I'm a beekeeper too. I was a beekeeper before this job was part of my life. So as a beekeeper, I hope that we can eradicate this. But I think that, you know, like we've learned from the folks down in Australia when varroa mites showed up, you know, they're hoping for eradication too. And at this point, you know, they're burning thousands and thousands of hives. So if it gets to that point, know that you have my commitment and the commitment of Veto Pharma to help you guys in this journey. So currently we have what's called the Vespa catch available across Europe. It's been really effective in helping to combat the Asian hornet in a completely different geography. And we don't have it registered here in the US. And it's not necessarily the contraption itself that's not registered. It's the attractant. The attractant is plant-based. I've had several samples sent over the last couple of years here for folks who want to try it out for wasps and a few other things. But we are working to get it registered in the US. Meanwhile, since you guys are on the front lines and I can't supply everybody with Vespa catches that want one currently, what I have done is I've ordered about 110 of these devices to be shipped to me with the attractant. So that tells me that it shouldn't be too hard to get the EPA to approve the attractant just because I'm able to get it in sample form. So what I would like to do, if each of you are interested, is to make sure that the apiarist in each state, obviously Georgia first, and those in the surrounding states right behind that, so that people on the front lines who are already in the trenches have the tools that they need. I want to make sure that you guys have that. So if you will reach out to the email that was provided, let me know your name and your address. I'll make sure that you get at least 2 for your state. You can share those how you like, along with the attractant that you can use. In an ideal world, the traps work best if it's 59 degrees or higher, and you would mix it. I don't have a copy of the actual device that Miguel made when he comes on, but the attractant comes in an envelope similar to this. This is 10 milliliters, or if you're going to be mixing a ton of it, it comes in a jug that looks like this, that's 1 liter, and it's reconstituted with 2 milliliters of water and then 50 grams of sugar, and that's what the attractant is. And if you need more information on what type of plant products are in the Vespa Catch solution, I can make sure that you have that too. So as they're being used, we ask that you don't clean it in between uses. If you need to put more attractant in, we ask that you don't clean it in between. And if you do find dead hornets inside, leave those, as they're going to work as attractants to act as a further attractant to the Asian hornets as they're finding these traps out and about. So I don't have a formal presentation. I knew that we would have some pretty in-depth academic presentations, but I wanted to make sure that I was on board for Q&A. And then Miguel does have a short presentation that he has put together for you guys so that you can see the device and that you can ask questions of him. And as I said before, he is a doctor of veterinary medicine. So if there are deep clinical questions that I can't answer, Miguel can certainly cover those. But just know that I'll be your point of contact in North America. And Grace, you're welcome to share my phone number in the chat too if folks want to talk offline. If not, I can do that as well. But I'd love to hear from each of you if you would like to have a couple of these in your arsenal as you figure out what works best for your geography. I'm always available for chatting if you need that. So if Miguel's still here, I think that he has something put together for you guys.
Yeah, I'm still here, so I can complement your comments. So let me share my screen, and I will just try to catch up 5 minutes to present what it has been done, but as a sum up, we can try to complement something. So okay, I think most of the topics I will try to share, so that's why I will be very, very short on my presentation, has been done. But I think it's important as a sum up to consider that if we want to put the target in trapping, there are 3 phases where it's relatively important try to limit the number of colonies. So phase 1, those schedule is related to the timeline we have in Europe mostly, so it's related to the period from February to May when the foundries are starting to create the new colonies. So this is probably the most important moment where we can limit the spread of the pest. Because here it's one less hornet means one less nest for the future. The phase 2, it's the one that is between June to September mostly, and we are mainly trapping workers in this period to limit the impact of their predation, mainly with the honeybees. And the phase 3 will be the last in the fall season, the last months of the year, October to November, December, depending on the weather conditions. And it will be basically focused on trapping the reproducers to limit the proliferation of the species in the following season. So I think I was not sharing, so I can do it. Maybe it's better. You can see better my screen. So in the spring trapping, basically, as I mentioned, that phase we will try to prevent from establishing the nest of the fundraises, or to stop them from maintaining the nest. So as I mentioned before, one less hornet means one less nest for the season. So they started to rise with the beautiful spring days when the temperatures are going up, and this is really the ideal moment to try to trap them. Of course, there are different discussions about the benefits of capturing different hornets, because sometimes, as you may imagine, the selectivity of the traps, especially some of them, are not really very good ones, and they are also limiting sometimes different insects that come inside that can be affected on this trapping as well. In the late summer, which will be the second peak of worker presence outside, so we are mostly targeting the reproducers. So in the summer and the beginning of the fall, so there is a high need for proteins to give to our larvae, and so it's also important to try to limit as much as possible trapping in this moment, because we will be reducing probably the predation that the apiary it's going to suffer in case we are able to contain a little bit. So this is something we have already discussed as well. So depending on the season, depending on the period of the year and the activity, the bait will be a little bit slightly different. Mostly sugar during the whole year, during the season, but especially there is a need for protein, especially during the summer period when they are trying to grow up the larvae in the different nests. Different ways of trapping, different models. I just try to summarize some of them. As you may imagine, a lot of handmade methods, just by cutting and inverting a bottle with different holes. Then I present, in the top right corner, it's the Vespa catch from Veto Pharma, which, as Amber mentioned, works perfectly well in different countries in Europe. We have different, boxes with grids and cones, sticky plates, electric harp in different regions, and seals to place at the entrance of the hive. So there are different models, and this is how our Vespa catch, works, especially well when there is a pressure of Asian hornets. So it's relatively selected. We are working on a 2.0 trap, which will be available probably beginning of next year, and that is 100% selective, because we have a design that will allow us to be totally targeting only Vespa velutina. So as I was expecting, to have a delay at this part of the agenda, so I didn't want to take a lot of time from you guys. So thank you very much, and I think we can jump on the Q&A session as far as you want. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, this has been so informative. And yeah, there's lots of questions to get through. So I think what we'll do is I've been copying them out of the chat, and we've covered some of these. So I'm not sure the best way to do this, because Dr. Nossa talked about the best way to destroy the Vespa's colony, which was one of the first questions. So I'm not sure if we still want to answer that or move on to. There's a lot, so I think we'll skip that because we had that covered. And if the person that asked it needs clarification, chat that in now. The second question, it's velutina sounds very similar to, this is going to be hard, Dilophospula maculata bald-faced hornet, except larger with more populous colonies. Given the similarities in the nest site selection and prey choice, would it be plausible that they would compete for the niche if velutina becomes established and that management strategies for the two could be comparable? Does anyone want to tackle that one?
I don't know. I can say a couple of words. I'm not an expert of Dolichovespula. It might be a possibility when you think about competition. However, you're thinking at a very complex situation. It's very difficult to make, predictions. You should know very well many different aspects of the biology of the species. So, for example, their environmental necessities, their diet, and it has been shown that very similar species of wasps can have rather different diet. So it's not so easy to really understand if they're going to be in competition. Many researchers in Europe thought about the possible competition, for example, between velutina and crabro, which look possible. There are current no data suggesting that, but just reports, anecdotal reports. But to do that, you have to do two things. One is to try to forecast, not to predict things, which is very difficult. The other point is to try to evaluate on the field. Or with a correlative approach, like you put traps, for example, and somebody did that in north of Italy, and apparently in one place there was no competition between the two species, crabro and velutina. I don't know I have no idea about data on Dolichovespula, so I'm not going to answer probably the question, but it's not so easy. My point is that it's not so easy. You need to go to the field and count them, basically. And the best way to do that is not only count, which is a correlative approach. You see one going out, one going down, but we know that the world is full of spurious correlation. So the better things to do is probably to remove one species from a place and see what happens to the other one. But this is a very difficult experiment. And obviously you cannot say, I'm gonna take 2 areas. In one, I remove the invasive species. In the other one, I leave velutina there. Who is gonna agree with that kind of experiment? So it's not so easy. It's a very interesting question from the biological point of view, but we do not have any answer, I guess.
So you have it, and I'm sure there's someone perhaps studying it, over time through with the new invasion in Europe, but maybe they're not on this call right now.
Yeah.
So I think this is the same question is kind of, does it compete in displaced data Vespa species? So I think it's the same kind of answer. How about, does Vespa velutina have predators that may help in their control? Sounds like maybe another biological control that would only target.
So again, probably Sandra knows that better. I don't know, because there are a couple of papers from Spain about, I guess it's the honey buzzard, Pernis apivorus. And I remember also a paper about Merops apiaster. That one birds of prey and one is Merops apiaster. I don't know probably the honey eater. I don't know.
Yeah, honey.
Sorry?
Honey eater.
Yeah, honey eater. So there are a couple of birds that are understudied for this, but I have no idea how much they can be really effective. I don't think they are so much effective, at least not in Italy. But Sandra can tell us something more about the Iberian Peninsula, maybe.
Yeah, there are some reports for animals eating Vespa velutina. The most important could be the honey buzzard, because it is really, it likes to go to the nest and searches for them, but it is a migratory bird who spends a lot of time in Africa and only comes here in the summer to have chicks. And it is known that before velutina, they had lesser chicks per nest. So they're increasing their population with the increase in velutina population, because they are having more food. But it is also a predator that eats on the surroundings of the nest. So it is locally, it favors local predation. So it helps, of course, but not enough as for be a biological controller. And other animals such as lizards, even chicken. Sometimes beekeepers leave the chicken in the apiary to forage, because they think that they are helping a little bit. Yeah, but they are so much, at least here, they are so much to eat that it is difficult to find a predator that really helps reducing the population.
That is very interesting. And I think this is another question for you. Are the hornets attracted to the electric harps in some way? I think it was this was asked during one of your slides. It looked like you had a thing in front of the hives.
The attraction is the hive itself. They don't have any extra attractant.
Okay. And then I believe in Asia, Apis cerana uses animal dung to either mask the odor of the hive or the masking of Vespa's marking on the hive. Is there any research conducted to create a spray similar to the dung that could be used on hives?
I don't know.
Me neither. No idea.
I think that's kind of ringing a bell from the northern giant hornet, that I think there was something with dung in there that
the study is the interesting one, but I have no idea about anybody trying to use that. And I guess, I mean, my feeling is that strategy works when the nest is concealed somewhere, that the nest of the prey is concealed somewhere. But when you have an apiary with tons of like dozens of hives, which are clearly visible. I guess that velutina doesn't only rely on the odor, but mostly also on vision. So I don't know if that's gonna work. I mean, I'm just betting, but my guess is that probably they will easily find the hive anyway. Just a guess.
Yeah. And then it looks like there's some comments about something about Hungary. It sounds like maybe somebody has a lot of comments about Hungary. So maybe we'll get through some more questions here quick, and then maybe this person wants to kind of share what's going on. There's a lot of comments about that. We can give them a couple minutes.
Brooke,
Yeah.
I would like to add a few things.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about the biology of these hornets, and that's great. But I think we need to also have it in this video also to remind people that, you know, if you find these hornets, contact your state authority, your apiary inspector in your state. You know, the reporting tool that I showed, that's for South Carolina residents, you know, so reports that may come in from another state, you know, you need to be contacting the people that are located in your state.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing that I wanted to add, besides the work together, is also to trust each other. Because what I saw in France is that scientists and beekeepers, they didn't communicate well at some point, and they began to make things apart, their processes apart, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help. It is difficult because some people are losing colonies and money and so on, but the suggestions of the scientists are for the good of everybody and the nature, and beekeepers need nature to have their bees healthy and productive too.
I think that's an excellent point about working together. You know, there's been it appears to me that there's a lot of rushing to be first and not be right necessarily, and it's creating a lot of confusion for people and a lot of different issues where it's not always about being first, but it's more important to be right.
I totally agree. I totally agree. The same things that Sandra was explaining about France, I guess, happened all over Europe among countries, that each country was going a little bit on its own. There were obviously collaborations, but it is not yet harmonized, the thought of Europe against velutina, which is absolutely incredible. In Europe, we are in Europe, we know about this issue since now it's almost 20 years, and still we don't have similar approach to I mean, we all share the same ideas more or less among researchers, but then our countries and even our regions in Italy are moving in totally different ways. So, I mean, try to be different.
I think that's really great advice, because I think ultimately the goal is the same goal, right? And it's just like how to get there. We all need to work together, and I think we're demonstrating that here with you guys collaborating with us. I mean, we just called you up because we were nervous, and we reached out, and you guys were able to show up and share all the info that you know just so quickly, and we appreciate that so much.
And we're happy to help more if you need. Don't worry.
Yes, excellent. We really appreciate it. So there's another question here, and then we can keep the conversation going for another 5 minutes or so. But what regions of the U.S. would be most favorable for Vespa velutina? And then, are there any issues relating to phenology that would either be pro or con to their existence here? So there was a map that one of you had that had the I forget the climate projection, where suitability model of potential range, I think. But to the other, relating to the phenology, that would either be pro or con. If anybody wants to address that.
Well, here I can show you the map. So this is a suitability map.
Share, Sandra,
Yeah.
you're not sharing.
No?
Yeah,
No?
now yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this one. I think you mentioned this.
Yeah.
So this is a study made by a team from France, and they gathered some different models to get this predicted climatic suitability distribution map. In this map in particular, they draw the presence in the native and in invaded ranges, because sometimes for these models, if you only take the native range, there are many different factors influencing the abundance and presence, such as competitors, predators, and climate, everything, environment in general. But they tend to adapt when they reach other regions. They adapt, and they are able to be in places where you weren't expecting, according to this native information. So it is very useful to see this. And not very happy news for you that there are very important portions of the coast, the eastern coast and also the western coast, like suitable for the species in North America. Of course, if it is able to move and to jump. Another thing I forgot to say is that it is a species that her own biology allows it to expand on the territories, but also many of these new side regions that invades, it is because it jumps using the human transport. As it arrives to Europe or to the United States, it uses human transport, or it is transported by humans better, on car, train, and trading goods. By trading goods, we are moving these species for instance, to Hamburg, places that it is not naturally, it could access so fast. It is transported by the human transport. Yeah.
Excellent. That's great. And then there's a new question. Sex pheromones have been used to eradicate fruit flies by attracting males and thus disrupting mating. Has anyone tried this in Europe?
Sandra, you want to go? Can I go?
Say it.
Yes, it's a good idea to use sex pheromones. It would be, the perfect attractants, the perfect baits, because it's sex specific. The only issue is that we're not yet really. There have been works which found the sex pheromone, but actually we do not know yet how much does it work in the field. And one of the main limitations, in my opinion, is that we do not know exactly how do they mate, in the field. We have not a lot of information about the mating system, where do they go to mate, etc., the timing. And so it's very difficult to use the sex pheromones if you don't know that. So just putting a trap in the middle of a place is not going to work. Obviously, there are long-range attractants, but it's not like moth. It's a little bit different for hornets, so they are not so, apparently, as far as we know, there are no examples of success with the use of sex pheromones so far, which doesn't mean that it's not a way to pursue, but surely it's not something that's gonna be productive and successful in 1 year time or 2 years time. So it's something that us from the side of research is perfect. It's really interesting. We've been working on that. It's difficult, but it's nice. But from the applied side, we can keep that as a second, third, fourth option strategy. Interesting, but we have to concentrate in the short time on something else, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that pheromones that have been identified and published are pheromones produced by virgin females. So they attract males. And as Alessandro explained, there are so many males in the environment during the sexual reproductive season that probably capturing some males, it could help, but it is not the best way. The best way will be maybe to capture queens, foundresses. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we are exactly at 4 o'clock, and I'm well aware that is later on the East Coast anyway. I have no idea what time it is where you guys are, probably close to midnight or something.
10 o'clock in the night.
Okay. Well, luckily not midnight. Well, again, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I mean, we had over 140 people at some point, so I think that's a great crowd for us, and we really appreciate you contributing and all the speakers. I think it was a well-rounded talk, and we will certainly be in touch if we need more info. We can't say thank you enough for the collaboration and the sharing of resources.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure being here with you.
It's been a real pleasure.
And I really hope you have success with the eradication program.
Thank you so much. This will help. All right. We'll, I guess, close the webinar, and thank you again so very much.
Ciao.
Okay.
Ciao.